So what we're going to do is we're here to expose it, let people tell their story, and let everybody in the public see the horrors of the court system in Suffolk County, New York.
Long Island Backstory.
Hi, I'm Gary Jacobs, and welcome to another edition of Long Island Backstory, where we film at the Hotbox Studios of Altice, formerly of Cablevision. Today is a real special day. This is a guest that I've been trying to land for a while, and finally I agreed to drive to Brooklyn and pick him up. So I got him to come all the way out to the island. My guest is Dr. Monty Weinstein. He's one of the premier experts in parental alienation, one of the premier experts not only locally, but really all over the world. Anybody who's in the movement of parental rights and family law reform, they all know Dr. Weinstein's name. There are several others who are, quote, experts in parental alienation, but there are few who are willing to stand up to the judges and attorneys. And there are many that I've run into over the years who do understand parental alienation. They've experienced it, they've read about it, they're psychiatrists, they know it exists, but they don't want to testify in court because they get destroyed by attorneys and by judges who say, well, it's not in the DSM, we don't recognize this, and they throw it out. And they really do get intimidated, and after 2 or 3 times testifying, they give up and they say they don't want to do it anymore. But my next guest actually puts his neck out and fights for victims of what I consider to be a crime. We'll ask the doctor if he believes it's a crime. Dr. Weinstein has a huge resume of qualifications, and I don't want to spend the entire half hour of the program going through all of them. So I went through his CV and I picked out a few of the highlights just to give you an idea of who I'm speaking with today. Dr. Weinstein is a board-certified clinical psychotherapist. He's licensed in marriage and family counseling, executive director of National Parents' Rights Association. He's a lifetime fellow of the American Psychiatric Association, fellow American Ortho Psychiatric Association, nationally certified psychologist, and expert witness in over 2,000 cases across America. Dr. Weinstein has appeared on CNN, Geraldo, CNBC, Matt Lauer, the Nightly News with Bom Brokaw, and now, actually the highlight of his career, Long Island Backstory. So, here we go. Welcome, Dr. Weinstein, and thank you for coming out today.
Hi. Well, what I forgot to tell you, because of these high winds, first of all, thank you for picking me up. I want to thank everybody for being allowed, given the opportunity to be on this show.
As I said at the beginning, I consider this to be a crime or child abuse. What's your opinion?
My opinion is definitely child abuse. It is definitely horrific. Gary made an incredible statement. He was calling me today, and I said, are you coming because of the winds? He said if I could deal with parental alienation, I could deal with any wind. And I said, you got to put that on Facebook, because it's so true and it's so biting and so cutting. Anyway, my life, my half a century actually working with families and children, but 35 years working, defending people who have been totally alienated, not only by their wives or their husbands, but by the court system, which is basically really disgusting. And I don't want to, spend the time just knocking the system, but I've been on numerous cases, and what I do is I don't give up, because those that give up don't have a chance with their children. You have to be in there. So could I state how I got involved in this?
Yeah, I'm going to ask you that.
I have a tendency coming from the inner city, etc. Talk.
That's okay. You have a lot to say. But I had a question about what you just said. You said that with the help of the judges, and I always say that people get mad at their ex for alienation, but I always say the judges and the law guardians are accomplices, because without them, they couldn't do it. And what happens is I see alienation starting off slowly. The parent goes to court and tries to stop it. The judge does nothing about it, or in fact, it enforces it. And then the alienator steps it up, and they go, wow, nobody's going to stop me. In fact, the law guardian's going to take my side now. What is your feeling on that? Are the judges accomplices?
I totally agree that judges are accomplices. I just want to disclose that I told my wife before I came here, who's a Supreme Court judge, that I'm going to say what I feel and tell the truth. That's my little tiny daughter sitting on the side. She said no. So I'm going to tell half truth. The reality is this would not happen. This removal, and I call it a parentectomy. And I was one of the first to coin the word parentectomy, even though another person wrote a book on it. But it's basically a removal of a father or mother. It can't be done without judges. You see, most of us go to work and then we come back and we go home and we play with the kiddies if we're fortunate enough, or fight with our wives depending upon what ethnicity we come from. But the reality factor is that judges, many of them, go to political clubs. And rather than come home and deal with the children, I'm not saying my wife, of course.
Of course.
But rather than come home and deal with the children, they go to the political clubs. And the political clubs basically are just, horrific in terms of family rights and family values and constitutional law and other issues.
But they have to, because otherwise they don't get elected.
Right.
It's all about keeping their job.
Right. And unfortunately, I love my wife, and she's not a party to all this stuff, but the reality...
And interesting, your wife actually had to run. She wasn't so endorsed that there was no choice. Your wife, who actually ran for office.
Right. My wife ran for office.
Which is different than Long Island, where we cross-endorse every judge.
Right.
And there's usually no choice.
In order to get up there, she had to run, and people were saying, well, he's that radical crazy that started fathers' rights in the inner city and hung and burnt judges. She's never going to get anywhere, and we're going to let that to be known. The reality factor is she won more popular votes than any other Supreme Court judge in the state. She got 540,000 votes, and this is not about advocating for my wife, but being an advocate like many of the people that are sitting in the audience or the few of the people that are sitting in the audience, and especially Gary, it takes a toll on you mentally, physically.
I had an afro before I started.
And guess what? I cut it off real early.
Yeah.
And you go through a great deal of agita. And
to say the least.
To say the least. And testifying, I went through blood to testify about parental alienation. Now, all the people that I have been fighting against who said it doesn't exist now have on their website, I'm an expert on parental alienation. Before they said, this guy's really crazy, that phenomena doesn't exist. BS, it exists. Ask any father or mother that lost their children, you'll know how much it exists. When you can't see your kids and they're taken away for nothing, that's really disgusting. And that's my beef with the courts, because basically families should be together. You're divorcing your wife or husband, you're not divorcing your children.
So how did you get involved in this field?
Okay, the way I got involved, first of all, it's a two-pronged involvement. The first prong is I was a psychiatric unit director with the government. And when I worked in Florida, and when I worked for the government in Florida, everything I said was like kosher, straight. Oh, he works for the government, Department of Health and Rehabilitative Services. I came to New York because my second wife, ran away and took my kid to New York. So I figured Florida, who's supposed to be like a very conservative state, everyone got liberal visitation years ago. Now I know it changed. I came to New York, and one person said, look, we have a meeting of fathers. Why don't you get involved? And I ran, and I became the head of Fathers' Rights Metro. Or I started Fathers' Rights Metro, which was a very radical group. I accompanied a friend to court one day in Manhattan Supreme Court just to say, hey, I worked as a psychiatric unit director, and I'm licensed, and this guy is really good, because I saw him play with his kids. He's warm, nurturing, bonding, and lovely. So, I testified, and all of a sudden, they qualified me as an expert. I didn't know what an expert was, or being qualified. And after that, my friend said, hey, you could testify and give opinions. And it, mushroomed, and I wound up giving opinions in all over the United States, in 43 states, all over Europe and France and Germany 4 times. I consulted all over the world, and I got involved with parental rights. And I also, at that time, had a child who's now a cancer surgeon, and I said to myself, I know I want to have a relationship with this child. And my ex at that time was trying to take my kid away, and I said, I'm not going to let that happen. And I went into court, and I realized then how disgusting family court was. I couldn't believe it. These were people, they had court evaluators, they had all types of people, and I was very radical at that time. So I got guys together who basically weren't fully crazy, but they were willing to stick their rear ends out in the line. We demonstrated. I closed the courts. 2 days, I closed Brooklyn Family Court and Supreme Court. 1990 was the only court that was closed. We had over 200 people, filing major demonstrations, and I got involved in the movement. And I feel good about that, even though I'm an old biddy now. I got involved with the movement, and I got involved in participating and trying to help people that basically were going through a lot of crises.
So let me ask you, you mentioned fathers' rights, and I sometimes get criticized. People will say, oh, you're always talking about fathers' rights and the bias in the court system. And I usually don't defend myself, because I say there are many women out there that I help with alienation, because a woman who is alienated is just as painful, and I don't believe anybody should lose custody of their children. But at the end of the day, I've been in court enough, and I've seen the results to know, in my opinion, that there is a bias against fathers. What's your opinion? Is there a bias against fathers?
There's a bias against fathers, but now, believe it or not, most of my clients, well, not most, 70% of my clients are women. I go and they ask me, do what you did when you were head of fathers' rights. Go in there, testify. If the judge doesn't listen to you, file complaints, advocate, file 1983 U.S. federal court actions, and never stipulate to any form of agreement, because you're stipulating your life away.
Well, we're going to get to that, because that's one of the things I bring up. Right. But just, I don't want to forget anything. Is there any hope if you're being alienated? Is there, if you're living, this show is Long Island Backstory. I know people are watching all over the world, but I'm a little bit more focused on Long Island, because I know there's different nuances in every county and every state. But for the people who are watching who live Nassau, Suffolk, Brooklyn, Queens, Manhattan, who are being alienated, is there hope that you can stop the alienation?
Yes, there's hope, but the only way you could stop alienation is to hold, this is my opinion, of course, is to hold the mother or the father accountable for this action. In other words, the kid is going to go and identify with who he or she is living with. And there's divided loyalties. The reality factor is that if you hold the mother or father accountable, meaning the court, and say, if this child has this attitude towards his father or his mother, you're going to go to jail, because you are a participant and a co-conspirator in systematically and methodically taking this child away. And that's BS. People have to be held accountable. And just to extend this type of argument, judges have to be accountable. They can't just sit up there with black robes and play with themselves. They have to be reality oriented. They're taking away a parent, a good parent, from the lives of their children. And that's heresy, and they're traitors for doing that.
Now, let's talk real life. I'm here in Suffolk County. I had a piece of shit, nasty judge, Marion McNulty, I hope this woman rots in hell. She was anti-father, she was biased, and she was corrupt. I kept going to court saying, stop the alienation. This bitch did nothing. What do I do when she doesn't want to hear and doesn't want to let me go to trial? Because by the time these judges know that if they let this drag on for 2 years before you go to trial, the damage is done. I had a law guardian who I became friends with that said, Gary, why are you fighting? Even if you win today, your kids are turned against you. Right. They're not going to come home with you. The damage is done.
Law guardians, and please accept these metaphors, have a special place in hell. You understand? They are supposed to advocate for the children and help the children make decisions. But what winds up, especially in the second department here in Long Island, is the same department.
Right, which is where we go if you appeal.
The panel with Harriet Weinberger, who hates me, and other people, because I've sued all these people in federal court from parents' rights, from fathers' rights. They co-counsel the case with the wealthiest attorney, because basically what they want to do is they want to remove the child from the life of one of the parents.
Why do they want to do it? What's your opinion on whether?
Because they get federal funds. Okay. After Mondale, he wasn't president, the Mondale law, that was totally distorted. Instead of protecting children, they're taking away children because the federal government gives the person and these people money to take away children and put them up for adoption.
Now we're talking Title 4D funding as well.
Yeah, I don't want to get ahead of myself.
Okay.
Because I get so wind up from my last thing, I just go. I'm this old steam ship, that just. But
there is people sometimes say, well, why would the judge? I tell people they do not want to give shared parenting. They usually want the moneyed spouse to lose custody and pay, and they go, why would they want to do that? If there is an incentive financially, and the judges who remove children and number one, who put fathers in jail for not paying, they move up. We love filling the jails. We got a lot of jails. We got to fill them.
I am proud to say that many of the people that fought me on TV and fought me before the legislature, many of them wound up in jail. Let me give you examples of people. Sheldon Silva. Okay, I don't know where they found this guy, but he was totally against shared parent in collusion with our dear friend
Helene Weinstein,
who I know a lot about because I ran against her for office, and I would have definitively have won years ago. But she came in with 5 attorneys, went to the appellate division after numerous people were signing. I had like 8,000 signatures to run against. I would have won. It was a shoo-in. And she said that one of my people did not notarize one of the petitions. So I was knocked off the ballot after I was in the ballot, okay? And so let me get to the reality. Sheldon Silva hated me. He's in jail now. The other guy that used to talk about, who lived in Park Slope, who's the guy that exposed himself every, I forgot his name.
The mafia guy?
No, the guy that was, he was like a heavy politician that always exposed his private parts.
We have an answer. Anthony Weiner.
Yeah, by the way, that answer comes from my 13-year-old daughter, Nora, whom I love, okay? So the issue is, Anthony Weiner, some other people who basically were involved, they said that I am distorted from reality. Then I said, this guy's exposing his parts.
But he's not.
Okay, but he's not. All right, let me get back to parental alienation. I discovered this phenomenon way before many other people did. This is not a self-serving statement, it's a fact.
So, just people who are watching, they say, you mentioned Helene Weinstein in Brooklyn. Why is she such a problem? The reason is she's in the state assembly, but she's the head of the, I think it's called Marriage and Family or Family...
Judicial Committee.
So the committee that anytime you want to put laws in order to change the family law, it has to go through her to get out of the committee. She is, in my opinion, a man-hating lesbian who is in bed with all the trial attorneys. I said that, you didn't say it, Monty. Who's in bed with all the trial attorneys. They fund her. Of course they don't want to have anything changed. They love it just the way it is. And this woman has not let anything. In New York, supposedly the most progressive state. Well, bullshit, we're not progressive at all. We don't want to change this because we have so much money invested in this that they don't want to change it. So until Helene Weinstein goes, listen, God bless, I hope she goes out in handcuffs like Sheldon Silver, because in my opinion, she's corrupt. She's bought off by all these other attorneys. Otherwise, why wouldn't you even entertain changing the family law? If you're looking out for the best interests of the children, surely having two parents is in the best interest of a child.
All right, so basically, let me just say, I've defended lesbians. I'm not against.
Oh, I'm not against them, but when they hate
lesbians
men.
or any other type of person that does not want to become disenfranchised. What I am against is people removing children systematically and methodically from the lives of their mothers and fathers. That is like a death sentence. It's disgusting and it has to stop. But we have to take an aggressive stand on how to stop it. I could speak about some of my stands if you want.
Well, I'd like to know, what do you do? Somebody's watching this show because I never heard of the word alienation until my ex-wife did it. So they get alienation, they go to court and they tell the judge, they're withholding the child on my parenting time. They're not calling me daddy anymore. They're telling the child to use their first name, all the signs, and people who are watching will know, hanging up the phone, not giving them mail, all these things. What do you do to stop it? When you go to court, do you file motions for contempt?
Things.
What do you do?
You do
concrete, because that's what people
several
watching need to do.
You go into court, you get an expert like myself or some other people that's not afraid, that will stand up to the judges. You have to make a record. What they try to do is sanitize the record before you start.
Absolutely.
So if I come in and say, hey, I'm licensed, I'm this, I'm that, they don't let you testify if you know you're going to go against the system. Parental alienation does exist. The phenomenon does exist. Most of these psychologists that are on the board of psychology, and I had many fights with them, are horses' asses. They basically, they whitewash and they want to get appointed by judges, so they say, oh, it doesn't exist. Ask a father, ask a mother that doesn't see their children, then you'll know it exists. That's number one. Number two.
But what do you say? You said file and get into court. File what?
Okay, you file papers with an affidavit from an expert in the phenomenon of alienation. That's number one.
But what's the cause of action? Are you filing for contempt or violating your rights as a parent? What?
Violating your rights, stopping you from seeing your children, denying you access, denying you the First Amendment.
So you file an emergency order to show cause in family court.
Emergency order, and you come in with an expert.
Right away.
The second thing you do is you appeal it. The third thing you do, you belong to a group of people that should come in, either fathers' rights or advocates, people that are not afraid, like you people, go and sit there with pads and take notes and hold this freaking judge accountable. If you lose your children, you file 1983 civil rights action before the federal court.
Could you do that pro se?
Yeah, everything I state now, if you're middle income or you're low income or you're no income, you have to learn how to represent yourself pro se, because otherwise your new enemy besides your wife or husband is going to be the matrimonial attorney, because you're going to be spending the rest of your life, instead of paying your ex, you're going to be paying him or her for bullshit, things that you could say. And so you say it, you go into federal court, and in addition, you demonstrate before the judges. When I was the head of Fathers' Rights Metro, we went to the judges' homes and demonstrated there, right in front of their homes. I used to hang and burn them in effigy. And the reality factor is, you know why? Because we have two wars that we're fighting, as I put it in Facebook. The first war is with ISIS and these monsters in Iraq, and the second war is against people that are removing us from our children. And I respect both wars. My son went to Iraq, my daughter-in-law was in the Army, and I could go on and on. The issue is that we must fight for our children. We have to go over to legislators and demand and keep a tally sheet of their record. And if they are supporting people that are removing your kids, then you must fight to the death.
Absolutely.
And that's the reality. And I know I get crazy and passionate, but that's our link to eternity, our children.
You know, Monty, everyone has their breaking point, and a lot of times people come to me, they say, I'm giving up. And they say, I'm afraid to protest, I'm afraid to speak out. If you don't, you're going to get destroyed. I'm telling you, they can't destroy you anymore. So go out and fight so they realize, you know what? Like you said, this guy's willing to fight for the death for his child. Fight, do protest, go, I don't care. I think that's great going in front of people.
And go out and do shows.
Show up to court I'm a president of Americans for Legal Reform. We do court watching. Show up in court watch and have 30, 40 people show up, because sunlight is the best disinfectant. And judges are a lot more careful when they see a bunch of crazy son of a bitches. At the end of the day, the judge, number one, doesn't want to get killed. Number two, doesn't want to lose their job.
Well, I'm
not advocating anybody kill anybody, but at the end of the day, they see crazy people. They don't give a shit about you. They want to keep their job.
They don't care. Family court judges do not care about families.
No.
Okay, that's number one.
And people have to realize that. They think, the family, when they go in, they're naive.
Right.
Best interest of the children. There's no best interest of the children whatsoever.
Well, what they mean is the best interest interpreted by them. The best interest is support does not come only in green. It comes from warmth, bonding, nurturing, and the hardest thing to give is yourself. So basically, what I do from my point of view is talk about what's going to happen, microcosmically and macrocosmically to this country if in fact we're going to break up the family. And it's happening now. It's happening in the inner cities. It's happening all over America. And the phenomenon of parental alienation, I will debate anyone that the parental alienation does in reality exist. And New York, who's supposed to be a liberal state, basically, I have an office in Georgia, I testify in California. People are much more liberal in these other places than they are in New York. So the reality of what I'm trying to say, don't stipulate, advocate, get an expert that's not afraid to fight. Don't worry about being intimidated, and learn how to handle the case yourself. Go down to the Second Circuit Federal Court of Appeals, see how better lawyers stand up for themselves. You've got to know your rights, and you have to know how to advocate for them. Because if you take away your kids, it's all lost. And so, I could go on speaking about this till for 3 days.
Absolutely. Again, Dr. Weinstein, Monty, thank you for coming to the show. I appreciate it. We're going to have more shows with Dr. Weinstein. So if you like what you saw today and you want more information, as he said, he could talk for hours. But there are several other shows that you could find on Facebook and YouTube. Just Google Dr. Monty Weinstein. You'll see them. Please, we got to get the word out. Share this episode. Share it on your Facebook. Copy and paste it to every group that you know. If you know somebody who's alienated, send it to them. Dr. Weinstein, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm Gary Jacobs, and thank you for joining us for Long Island Backstory.